Well, welcome to another episode of the Grace Podcast. We're so glad that you joined us, whether you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, or whether you are listening via our podcast in your car or wherever you might find yourself. We're just glad to have you listening and with us. And the podcast is kind of an experiment for us at the moment, and we've loved having different guests on from different backgrounds, different perspectives, and an opportunity for us at Grace Family Church and beyond to just go a little bit deeper in exploring faith together. And the things of life. So I'm very excited for today's episode. We've got Robert Ntuli with us, and he's a pastor in our city. We actually had him recently come and speak to our staff, which was just fantastic. Honestly, it was like, for me, you were the best, Rob. So well done. We just love to hear your story, a little bit of where you come from, how you came to faith. Tell us a little bit about you growing up, how you found yourself in ministry, what you actually do. I'm sure the listeners would love to know.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me here, and for this conversation. Yeah, I grew up in what we would call formerly initially Zululand. I think we speak of KZN, KwaZulu Natal now. So I grew up in Mpangeni, which is like 1.5 hours north of Durban if you're driving. And I grew up in a Christian family. I'm a PK, proper PK, by the way. So my father was a pastor in a Pentecostal denominational church, and church was in our yard. There was no missing church growing up. My father and my mom would make sure that we go to church every Sunday, man. And so certainly my preteen years were very much about church life and all of those things, and people coming home to be prayed for. I witnessed all of those things. So obviously I only got saved later, but proper PK by definition. Awesome. Of the phrase pastor's kid.
There we go. I'm married to a pastor's kid, so I know what that's like. You get to see the dark underbelly of what happens in church. But the fact that you're a pastor now, I mean, something must have landed there,
Absolutely. I mean, it's I often think about it. We cannot underestimate the little routines and tradition, whatever you want to call it. Taking our kids to church and being exposed. I know growing up, I had moments where God spoke to me. Sure. I had moments of like deep conviction. I may have not followed them up, but I think the idea of exposing kids to a church environment where there is the activity of the Holy Spirit goes really very, very deep. Certainly came back for me at a later stage.
Great. And I love what you say about rituals and routines. That I think so often in modern day life we've lost a lot of those rites of passage, and those rituals. And I think there's something to be said around, even for me growing up in sort of a Catholic tradition, there's confirmation and those sort of things. Obviously we don't have that in our world, but I do think that, you look at cultures, any culture, whether it's Zulu culture or, the Mormons going off on their missions, there's a sense in which there's like a rite of passage that I do think is important. And it's nice to hear stories of people who come from that background, who haven't turned their back on the church, so that's really exciting.
No, absolutely. I mean, it may not always be evident to the parent, but there's a lot of stuff that God can do to a 12-year-old boy, just deep on the side interactions and transactions with God. Sure. that create a sense of memory that, hey, God is speaking to me. God is speaking to me. You think of the story of Samuel growing up in the temple and learning to hear the voice of God inside of a very routine, context. There's a lot that God can do just if we follow routine as parents. I know from experience.
And how did you end up, in the ministry? So you only got saved later. How did you end up where you are? Tell us a little bit about just what you're doing now, the church you lead now.
So I lead a church, Living Stones Agency is the name of the church. So what happened was, my preteen years were very much deeply inside of church routine. And I think my high school years, I kind of, I drifted from that routine, and I think my high school and varsity, I studied that side. I studied in Pangeni, so I went up to the University of Zululand that side, and then I came here in Durban in 1997 to start a career after having finished my degree. And I was, looking forward to a great career, So I went into, I think, got employed within the municipality here in Durban, and went into an FMCG environment in a marketing, context. And then that's when God called me. In 1998, I got saved.
Sure.
God introduced Himself to me. But then again, it wasn't for the first time, really. Just at this time, He finally caught my attention.
Yeah.
And yeah, so 98, I got saved. It was quite a radical salvation. I feel almost like God was redeeming the lost years. Like I talk about the high school and the varsity having drifted away from an environment of church. And it was a radical salvation. 98, 99, I was kind of getting clarified about, hey, I was in this marketing environment working for a multinational company. Actually, God was saying, hey, this is not your future. I wanted to come back into the church environment to lead a church. So in 2000, I stepped out of my then career, went back to Mpangeni to seek for God, to seek His face, which was quite critical for me because I made some friends at the time. We were praying. I learned to pray, and it was in that context that God spoke within that year 2000 and said, "Go back to Durban to start a church." Sure. It was a very, very specific instruction.
Yeah.
I actually spoke out of a word in Exodus 25, verse 9, "Go and build me a house according to the pattern I will show you." And yeah, I mean, it's in some sense, some people at the time were worried. I was maybe a little bit maybe I was a novice, maybe I was getting overzealous. But hey, God was speaking.
Sure.
And came back to Durban in 2001. We started the church in July 2001. Had some friends already that I'd made at the time, and some of those people felt the call to join in and to be part of that work. And that's how we started.
Wow. 21 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. Time flies. And then Natal Technicon, I think it was in someone's room with 4 students. And yeah, the rest is history. That's how we started.
That's amazing. And your actual conversion, you said, was fairly dramatic. Do you want to give us just a headline on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I started, my mom would obviously, so what happened was my father passed away in 1985. I would have been maybe around 10 years old at the time.
Sure.
And so my mom kind of raised us up. And she was very strong about going to church. So when I came to Durban, she always would say, "Hey, go to church, go to church, go to church." And obviously she wanted me to go to the same church denomination that we were part of at home. And I didn't, at the time, I think I was 22 or so, I didn't quite connect. I think I may have gone there once or whatever, but I didn't feel the connection. But yeah, anyway, I started going to this other, more like charismatic church. And yeah, someone was preaching. I think it was out of a Hebrew scripture. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I actually don't remember the rest of the message. Other than that, Jesus is the same yesterday,
I don't even
today,
remember
and
my
forever.
message from last Sunday, so we're okay.
Yeah, so it's amazing what God can do, man. It's like He got me saved by a message I can't even remember. So something about the phrase Jesus being the same yesterday, today, and forever that got me saved.
Amazing.
I actually was, so when the time came for the altar call, I knew God was speaking to me. Man, I was in tears, but I got fearful to go to the front.
Yeah.
And I went afterwards, to the ushers, whoever the counselor, said, "Hey, I think something happened to me," and they prayed for me. But what then happened was that I probably went to 3 altar calls after that, just to make a statement that, hey, I'm
Just
I'm
to make
bold and courageous here.
that's awesome.
We're dealing with fear. We're
Yeah,
dealing with
that's
shame.
yeah.
Sometimes we can be shameful. At the time, I had friends and we're doing whatever we're doing. Going partying,
Mm,
social life, drinking, doing all whatever that we're doing.
yeah.
Some of it wasn't necessarily evil, but there is a shame that comes with, I think, coming out of a social circle.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, so I went to about 3 altar calls after that. And I
So,
was emphatic, like, hey, I'm
so now
I'm
do you do
properly
now you
saved.
do 3 altar calls every Sunday for the
Now
people.
I do 3 altar calls every Sunday because I'm looking out to a guy like me.
That's awesome. Rob, you are I mean you won't I know you won't promote your own thing, but you're a very, very smart man. You're a very well educated man. I think that's how we got to know each other, through social media. I've always enjoyed your thoughtful posts and responses. I think particularly around some challenging issues in our country, around prejudice and racism, and the division that still exists within our churches and our country. And I think you've always been sort of a fourth. I think of you as a thought leader. You have a passion about the church. You're passionate about people coming to know Jesus. What do you see as sort of some of the most important things that, as Christ followers, we need to be aware of, or understand in this sort of current cultural moment?
I, I think, well, first and foremost, in a South African context, I think to build a church without a demonstration of a reconciled community
Yeah,
is to shoot ourselves in the foot. I think we are not bearing a good Christ-like testimony
absolutely.
if we cannot demonstrate that reconciliation is possible. It is impossible outside of Christ, but it is possible within Christ. And I think, obviously, South African society is so fractured,
Mm,
and apartheid and racism has been at the core of our history. Wherever you go, I've been in the workplace, and issues of race are very, very prevalent. I talk to friends, issues of race are still prevalent.
yeah,
Um, uh, you know, I'm now exposed to, my son is, 16 years and going to a school, a historically white school. So I'm exposed to that environment and the issues so I find that it seems like the same stubborn reality is very consistently prevalent in spaces, social spaces in South Africa.
mm,
So I think it would be so powerful if the church in South Africa, was able to demonstrate a reconciled community.
yeah,
But I think that links to another challenge in church. I think it links to the challenge of believers having to understand that, hey, my point of connection is not just a Sunday morning gathering. I'm actually journeying with the people together
mm,
to incarnate Christ as a collective, to
mm,
express Jesus Christ as a collective, which means that connections have to be a little bit more meaningful than just showing up and disappearing
yeah,
every week. So the reconciliation issue is not possible without church building proper communities,
yeah,
faith-based communities where people can interact and discover one another, and
sure.
yeah, and be transformed by Jesus together.
Yeah, that's huge. I love that language you use of incarnated collectively, and the reality is, how can we model reconciliation if we don't even have relationship?
Absolutely.
And I found that the only way to dismantle any form of prejudice is to get people in rooms together. And then you start to realize that we have far more in common than we have apart. But without that
Absolutely.
proximity, it's almost impossible. But what a gift that the church is able to do that. The church is one of the few spaces in our society where you can gather together all different backgrounds, classes, races, genders, and come together under one banner, so, and I think you guys have modeled that beautifully, in the way you live your personal lives, but also as a church. And what do you think stops people from pursuing that reality? I mean, even as the pastor, it's very easy for me to get up. It's that whole joke. I don't want to go to church today. I don't want to go. You have to. You're the pastor. So, but when there is we have busyness in our lives. People have got so much going on. So there is a sense which I'm going to go to church, hear the message. I'm going to get out. It's an in and out thing, and I'm not doing deep relationships. So what do you think prevents people from engaging in the community of faith, but also just in their own personal faith, in terms of pursuing Jesus wholeheartedly?
I think it's in some sense it's people's perspective of what church is. There's different definitions of what that looks like in people's minds. Paul does speak about pulling down strongholds and how mindsets and stuff. Yeah. I think that the idea of church as a Sunday morning experience is very, very prevalent, is very, very strong, and that's good. And we need the Sunday morning. We need to come together to worship Jesus together, to teach, to do all the stuff that happens on Sunday morning. But unfortunately, where that is just the end, and in people's idea of church, and where the process that happens, the transformational process that happens, the journey together, and how we allocate time for that. Because if we don't see, our model of church dictates on the allocation of time, the time that we budget for church. So if church is something that we go to and come out of, then it equally limits us from exploring and experiencing the deep, the inheritance that Jesus has for us. And I think that's where the limitation is. So we have a very devotional idea of what church is. Devotional as in I go to church to worship, which is important and biblical. But I think there is lacking a communal understanding of what church is, which is really like church is, when you look at the biblical metaphors that are used in the Word of God, church is the body, church is a family. I can't have
a family with one person.
You can't have a family with one person. You can't have a family without time to sit around the table, to experience life together. And then to discover each other's or one another's issues, imperfections, and to encounter God together, and to see one another's vulnerabilities, and to know that, hey, I was there when Tom was transformed by God, when Robert was transformed by God. And that sense of collective experience is what actually deepens community.
Yeah, it's good.
And I think we're lacking those. We have a very almost like program, almost like very institutionalized.
And transactional.
Transactional, concept of church. And I think we're lacking the family, the community, the fellowship in the true sense of the word koinonia. And without those, we can't even get to the reconciliation part and all of the other things that the Bible calls us to be and to do before this world. So I think it's in the worldview of what church is.
Yeah.
And I guess it calls for people like us to probably spend more time actually bring those definitions of what is church. But if we can clarify what church is, then we can clarify the kind of processes, the nature of engagement that is required for church to be church.
That's good. And I mean, worldviews don't easily shift. Especially
worldviews are difficult to shift. It's the reality is that sometimes long before our conversions, we have very, South Africa has a strong Christian culture. So we're socialized a certain way. And unfortunately, what happens is that we take those worldviews that we may have had before our conversions about what church is. We receive Jesus, but we still confine him within those worldviews.
Yeah, it's so good. Absolutely.
And,
That's a
you
lifelong
know,
process, I guess, of dismantling those worldviews that limit God and limit our view on how God works.
absolutely. I mean, Romans 12 talks about it, right? Be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yeah.
There's a lot that, yeah, Jesus needs to help us to renew in our minds.
Amen. Robert, I want to
Because
shift.
once our minds are renewed, then we create space for God to do some amazing things that he wants to do through the church.
I love that. I want to shift gears a little bit. You spoke about being vulnerable. I know even in our time together with the staff, I think you were very vulnerable in terms of some of your own wrestles and struggles. I think I always ask this to guests because it kind of it removes the barrier of, we the guys on the podcast who have the answers, or we're the pastors. And I asked this question, how have you fallen short or messed up this week? And what are some of the wrestles? So there we just go. You can just say pass, but it's quite interesting to see how people respond and how much that actually brings people together when we start with, instead of starting with, hey, this is all the stuff I'm getting right, but hey, these are some of the things I'm actually struggling with. So what are some of the struggles you've had this week?
I'm thinking it's only Wednesday morning, man.
Oh, geez. I got hundreds already, bro.
and exactly, and that's the nature of who we are.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. So we have two children, a son and a daughter. Malusi is 16, and Kanyiso is just turned 14.
Okay.
Kanyiso is autistic. So she has quite a severe, her speech is very limited, and she's got autism, and so that means her emotions and all those things. And so this week, my wife Zamo is down with flu, like hectic. So I had to prepare Kanyiso, help her get ready for school this morning.
Sure.
So here's the thing: is that whenever Kanyiso has to deal with daddy, it's like almost like daddy-daughter moment. She doesn't take me seriously. And here I was trying to get her to get ready for school, and I found having to check my patience for her, because obviously, she's an autistic child, and the way she processes is not instruction, and then it just gets worse if it's me, because
the harder you come down, the more the thing gets explosive.
she just thinks, oh, it's just daddy, we're having a fun. It's a fun moment here. Like I'm like, hey, we need to get to school.
Sure, that's awesome.
So here I was this morning checking my patience, and this Bible talks about the fruit of the Spirit, and patience is one of them.
Yeah. Oh man,
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. I mean, even like, that's the crazy thing is, we have to get up on Sunday and then you preach, and how many times, God will test you on that very thing you're preaching on that week,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'll just
Absolutely.
share I'm kind of the same, my boys, in terms of getting, what I found is that when I'm urgent to get out the door, things generally get worse, because I'm hustling and come on guys, and it only just ups the ante of the tension in the house, and usually if you're not stressed out, then they're fine, but
Yeah, that's right.
so often I found in parenting, it's about my stuff, not about their stuff,
Man, it's like I've grown ever since we got our first child in 2006. Man,
Parent, if you haven't learned patience, parenting will infuse that in you pretty quickly.
man, I tell you, I've grown. I think I can say I'm a growing man since 2006, man. I'm still growing. I'm still growing.
Yeah,
I'm
for
still
sure.
growing.
You got teenagers, dude. You're in the middle of that thing. I haven't got there yet. Rob, I know we could keep going for ages. I love chatting to you, and even outside of the Zoom, just connecting with you, it's been amazing. So any final thoughts for our listeners, just in terms of maybe encouragement to people who may be listening, who may be facing their own struggles and challenges, in terms of following Jesus, or their relationship with church, or anything we've spoken about today, or anything on your heart you'd love to just share with us as a closing thought?
Hey, you know what, Tom? I'd say, man. you know, the nature of life is that we have challenges, whether we are disciplined in our following Jesus or not. Life will always have challenges.
Yeah, that's good.
And I always say this, better the challenges that come with following Jesus,
Mm,
and better the challenges that come with being part of church in a meaningful way. Because
yeah,
it does not mean that if we pull away and unplug ourselves, that there won't be challenges.
yeah,
The nature of life is such that we are always wrestling through something.
yeah.
And I say, rather make your battles meaningful. You know,
Mm,
make your battles count. Let them count by being the kinds of battles that you engage because of your following Jesus
mm,
and because of your meaningful participation in the process of church. We've come out of a very challenging season, this pandemic and all the stuff. There's been a sense of loss, and we're grieving loss, not just loss of lives, but loss of what used to be and loss
yeah,
of a way of life.
yeah,
And I think our therapy is in Jesus. Our therapy is in the process of church. The sooner we plug ourselves back to the routines, which are biblical routines, stuff like don't forsake the gathering of the saints.
yeah. Richard.
Keep praying and keep being devotional, worship the Lord, and all of these things are very, very important. I think for us to be healed and to be made whole again, so that other people can see us as a witness
Mm,
that we are supposed to be, and hopefully come to Jesus themselves. So my thing is, make your battles meaningful,
I
make your
love that.
battles count.
I love that.
Let them be the kind of battles that come because you're following Jesus and you're part of the process of church, because
I
there
love
will be battles anyway.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm deeply encouraged by that. So thank you for encouraging me. As you say, battles are inevitable, but let's make our battles meaningful. I think that's
Yes,
you've got the hard road or the hard road, but the hard road with Jesus is better than the hard road without him, you know.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Well,
absolutely,
we really
absolutely.
appreciate your time, Rob. And in the midst of having a sick wife and getting kids to school, and you still made time for us to be on the podcast. We really appreciate it. And I know that this will be an encouragement to many people listening. And so, to our listeners, to our guys watching on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in again. Join us for the next podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share if this video has been helpful for you. Share it with someone maybe needs to hear this message, and we'll see you again next time. But thanks, Rob. Thank you for joining us once again, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks. Cheers, Tom. Thank you,
Thank
man.
you,
Thank
Rob.
you.
Thanks, man.